Everyone, it's Paul from Alexander Knife Sharpener and Laser Engraving. I'm about to change my RA2 from the roller setup, which is what it's currently in, to the chuck setup, to use the chuck. And you have to kind of reassemble it to do that. And I was really kind of hoping that this would work well for tumblers. Everybody I've seen that has been doing tumblers with these always seems to be using the chuck setup. And after doing some testing and things with it last night, I think it's just because it's easier with the chuck, because of a lot of like little variations and things. So let me give you an example. This is the job I have to do. I have to do an engraving on this hydro flask, and you can see it has a handle. And the problem with this, as you can see, the handle is going to hit the roller. And so it's easier if you can have it either grabbed. You can go from the inside and expand, but that gives you an option so that you are not going to, necessarily run into the handle running into it. So I get the feeling that the rollers are great if you have a perfectly round thing that you're doing. And even though they are, you can adjust it in so it can even be angled, but it really has to be kind of just the right thing. Or, if you were doing like round pieces of wood or dowels or that kind of type of thing, if you're engraving something like that, this would probably work very well. But for this, I've been finding it challenging. So I'm going to switch it over to the chuck, and I haven't seen any videos on how to do that. So I figured I would film it to help those of you that have to make this transition from the rollers to the chuck. Okay, so the very first step is we have to take the rollers off. And to do that, there are 2 screws on the back side of the roller down at the end, and we're going to use the little drivers, the little black drivers that came with these. And these are in pretty good. So I'm going to have to give that pretty good. Yeah, they are tight. So that's the first step, is just remove these 2 screws. And make sure you hold on to them, because if you want to use your roller again without the chuck, you're clearly going to need these, unless these screws go in somewhere else, which is a possibility. I'm not sure if they go in to the other part that we're replacing it with. But I'm going to put these to the side for now, and let's flip it back over. And now I should be able, you can see that comes right off. These 2 end pieces come off, and I can take the rollers right off of there. We are going to remove the first roller. We're going to remove B, and I'm just going to put that in my box. And then we still have roller A here. Okay, so here's the deal. Roller A, we have to undo this little inset screw. Okay, so our next step is to loosen the set screw that's right in here. And there's actually 2 of them. So you're going to use your smaller screwdriver and just rotate this around, and you'll see there's a second one. And undo both of those. You don't have to take the screw all the way out. Just undo it enough so that this pulls right out. And then put this in a safe spot too. And be careful where you place them. The rubber is very attractive to dust and dirt and stuff, and so be careful where you put it, because it will pick up a bunch of junk that you may not want on there. We're going to install a piece that's going to move our chuck. Okay, so the next part is installing that little piece onto the motor directly. And what you have to do is just slip it in And then if you flip it over, you'll see you have a hole down here so that you can tighten your screws. So if you're wondering how the heck you're supposed to do that, that's how you do it. You just turn it till you can see your screws and then tighten them right onto the arbor of the motor. And then rotate it till you see your other screw.
Playing from Paul's MacBook Pro.
And now I can see my other screw in there. You guys probably can't see it on the video. Sorry, it's just a little dark. But I'm just turning it till I can see both screws. And now I'm tightening that down. Okay, and now that is nice and secure on the motor on the outside, and that's where that goes. We're going to take our chuck assembly. You're going to get your belt out of your little box of goodies. You should have a belt in there. Take your bag of screws. Go ahead and empty those out. You should have 2 longer screws in there. Okay, these are M4 by 20 by 2s. They are going to go into the top of your chuck. We're going to also put our belt on now, and we're going to put our belt around our little arbor here, okay? And then these go right down in through here into those 2 holes right on top of the Xtool. So just make sure that Xtool is still readable facing you, and these are going to be your the bigger screwdriver, and you're just going to line this straight down up through those holes. And screw that into A and B. Pretty easy to do. All right, so I got those down in there. They're nice and snug now, and you can now see that it's starting to look like a rotary chuck and not so much a roller anymore. All right, and we still got some extra screws still going, and I'm keeping my original roller parts here so that I don't get those all mixed up. In fact, I think I'm going to put them, I think just for smart and safe keeping, I'm going to put those in this small bag to keep them separated. So there's my 2 original screws, my 2 post holders, and I put my 2 rollers back in the box. So let's continue. Okay, so the only small change I'm making, I had just screwed the little set screws all the way in on the silver piece where we took the roller out of. They're showing that to store those away. It's probably totally safe to leave them cranked in like I did, but I decided to take them out and put them in the bag so that it's all together in one thing, just in case I forget at some point that I left them in there. Instead, I took them out and did put them all together in the bag with all those parts. Okay, so the next part, we're going to turn it onto the motor side. And this is where a little bit is going to be your preference and exactly what you're doing and what you want. So they give you 2 different sets of kind of grabber parts that grab either the outside, or sometimes you can put these on the inside of your tumbler and expand them. And you have to decide where you want these positioned. And they are somewhat adjustable. You can sometimes on some units move them in and out a little bit. I'm going to go with the bigger ones. I've usually tended to use those on my other units, so that's what I'm going to go with. And I'm just going to go with the closest setting that's on the chuck here. So let's see here. And I'm going to get one started there. But this is, you know, you might want to completely, depending on what you're doing, you might want a completely different setup here. And you can get an idea by opening your chuck teeth a little bit too, as to which holes you want to be in. So to open the chuck, you're just going to come up here and stick the big round part through one of these round holes. And then if you start going counterclockwise, it starts to open the chuck up, and the clockwise closes it. And that'll give you an idea of a little bit better there. So you can see we have the 2 sets of screws. It is designed so that you can use multiple holes. So you can line up with the different holes, but it's not going to use every one. So you can either, if you line up with the bottom hole, you cannot line up with the bottom 2 holes with the big one. But if you move up one, you can either be the 2 middle or the 2 end. So depending on the chuck you're using and how much you slide this in and out, you have some variation here as to making it even bigger. But it looks like you're either in the bottom hole and middle, or the middle hole and the top. So that's how that looks like that's going to work. So it looks like it's just 2 options depending on which hole you put your screw in the bottom. Whether you use the top or the bottom one, then you'll be in the middle. And if you use the top of the bottom 2 holes, then you'll be in the middle and in the top, if I'm correct, and I believe I am. And are these all? Yes, these are all exactly the same screws. You know, you do get there are some like crazy big tumblers out there, and sometimes you do need to adjust these to accommodate some of those really, really big things. And I've even had some that were so big. I don't know about this particular rotary tool, but I've had some that wouldn't even fit in my rotary tool for my other laser. It was just too big, even on the largest setting. And I had to do a internal setup where instead of grabbing the outside of the tumbler, I actually went on the inside and pushed out. It was the only way it could grab because the tumbler was so big. And that happens. But, you know, that's why whoever designed this thought about that and gave you a bunch of different options there. So that's always good. You know, this isn't something you're going to be switching back and forth, hopefully every day. But I do get the feeling that the chuck tool is maybe a little bit more useful for most people than the rollers. And that's probably why you might see everybody else has it set up with the chuck and not as much the rollers. Because like I told you yesterday, I found some limitations to the roller, and it wasn't going to be the easiest thing to do tumblers with just that roller. Okay, so and this is a good example of what I was talking about sometimes you're going to grab from the inside. So I just checked this on the middle setting, all the way cranked out, and it couldn't grab the end of this cup. So an option is also going on the inside, and you'll see here I could put this on the inside of this cup. Yeah, so that's not even a perfect. So you can see, yep. So that is, I'll show you again here, why you need to be able to adjust these. And, you know, it's not always a super quick, like, bing, bang, boom, unless you leave this set up all the time. It's not always this simple thing. So let me show you here. I'm going to go all the way to the furthest setting here. So I'm probably going to move those screws even further out. Because, yeah, you can see that's not grabbing. I don't have enough space there. So since I'm here and doing it, I'm going to move mine to the outer screws. Okay, so I made that adjustment. I went to the furthest setting that I could go out, and I'm going to guess that's probably where most of you are going to want yours too. And to do that, you're going to have one hole that's visible on the chuck on the bottom. So that's going to give you the furthest, widest setting that this can do. But you'll now see I can fit this as an outside grab, usually where I want that. So I'm just going to open this up. Yeah, and show you guys so you can see. Now we got that nice outside grab. And then you also have this piece here, which is for support and has two little rollers. The one thing with this is you can't be cranked all the way down to the bottom, okay? So this thing will crank all the way down where it will touch. But if it touches, your wheels will not move. So make sure you come up enough that this thing is able, that those wheels are able to rotate. Because if they're touching, they're not gonna do you any good. And there are times that they are not gonna work for you. Sometimes it just is still gonna be too high, depending on the item you're using. And then you also have this item here, which can go on. And this would probably be better turned the other way around to use this, but I'll show you that because this is probably the best way for this particular setup would be to clamp it this way, and then we could also use this support, which basically snugs up against the end there. You can see, can you guys see that? And just gives it that extra support, holding it on the end there. And then this piece here can be locked down, and you can see now we have our hydro flask locked in there really well. And now it can do a rotation all the way from one side to the other. I forgot to take my chuck out, which would give me definitely plenty of place to put my engraving on, or whatever I'm going to be putting on here. And I want mine so if the person's holding it facing out, so I'm going to be looking to work in kind of like this area right here. But that is basically how to convert your roller to the chuck. Not too difficult, but it takes a little bit of time. But I think you'll probably find that this is more useful for you than the roller, and it does come in the roller configuration, so you're gonna have to take the few minutes and make that conversion. Okay, so now I've placed the unit inside in the very middle of my S1. Now, I have seen some very smart people out there, like Clack Shack was one. He made a jig for his, and I think he even sells it, so that's an option, because you do want everything centered. It's very important for getting your tumbler engravings just right. What I like to do is I like to center my unit on the base by using the laser. So I come down here and I make sure that that's all lined up, and that this is all lined up and everything looks good there. And then I want to find my center of my cup, and I use the laser to do that. And that's how I know I got the spot that I really want. Now, should you lock this thing down? It is not a bad idea. I totally agree with Clack that this thing's moving at pretty good speeds, especially for tumblers. And if you set up in the middle, you get the advantage of it being able to do over travel. And that's going to work great for you for getting these done quickly. But movement, always an issue. So you want your material locked down. I don't think it's a bad idea, you know, if you were to screw this in somehow, use something to lock these in, or to build a jig for it. All of them, excellent ideas. You know, can you run it just like this? You can, but you do always run the risk of it moving. I haven't made the exact decision yet of how I want to lock mine in place. There's a very good chance I might do Clack Shacks idea and put a jig in there to hold it centered best I can so we get little movement. Now, just one other quick reminder that it is important is the leveling. So you want to be relatively close to level. And you can see I'm a bit off here, okay? So this end could come up a bit. You know, that's about level there. And that's important for a really good engraving. So what I would probably do would be to, you know, shim this one side with something. And you can see that one piece of wood there, that kind of worked perfectly. And now I am right in the center of my spirit level there. That is perfectly centered because quite often these are tapered, but you want to try and get that as close to level as possible. Very important for an accurate engraving. And remember in your software that you have to go in and change the settings for chuck and not roller. When you use the roller, I think it's kind of assuming that the material is going to be almost completely flat for some reason, and it doesn't need a perimeter or diameter measurement. The chuck does require that. So you always want to take a measurement of your cup. Remember, these are centimeters and it's going to want millimeters, so you're going to be multiplying that number by 10. So you just simply wrap this around here, and 28.2, which is 282. And that would be what they call perimeter. And then, so if I put 282 in there, you'll see it'll make the diameter, it's going to cut it in half. For those of you out there that don't remember your geometry, and I am no geometry expert, but yeah, perimeter is the total amount of the circle and diameter is the half. Some people do like to measure halfway across. So you can put it in either way. If you put in diameter, it's going to put the other measurement in for you. So measure either way you like, all the way around or halfway across, and know that the XCS software will make that adjustment for you. Okay, so don't forget you can use your crosshairs to line up your base. Depending, you know, if you're going to lock it in, like I said, I think that's a good idea. But use your crosshairs, and that's going to give you a really good idea of how you're lined up. I have mine head going this way, the base going the other way. I've watched Clack Shack. He kind of does his the other way. It doesn't really matter that much. I like it this way because I want to use the support. He had his turned around the opposite direction, and sometimes that works better. It also can depend on the tumbler. This one is working a little bit better with some support here holding it on this end. Now, remember, line up in the center of your engraving too, and then he gives a great tip, and it is a fantastic one. I've seen a lot of people do this. You know, make sure that you draw a rectangle on your piece and simulate a label. And I'll just like quickly show you what I did here. So I drew a rectangle here, and you can see I have my label going this way because this, for me, this is the top of my tumbler. On Clack's video that I watched, he had his top down here. Doesn't matter, just make sure you have your artwork turned the right way. And then this is basically if you wrapped a label around the item, what it would be. Now, I have just a test one in there, and I even wrapped it with some green tape because I want to kind of just get a test to see that everything is set up appropriately. But this is a great way to do your wraps. And if you wanted to put other things on here, keep in mind that's your label, okay? And that's what you're working with. And then when you hit frame, so I'm going to show you this. I'm going to go to framing. here is what the machine is doing. So this is my dead center of my engraving. When I hit frame, it's going to go down and it's going to show me where it's going to start, and then it's going to show me where it ends. All right, so I'm going to hit frame. Okay, it's going down. This is where it would start, and that's where the engraving ends. Done. And that's all that that's doing. Okay, now I'm just going to run my little test here so you guys can see it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so there's the end of my test engraving. This is just a look at what I'm going to be putting on there, and you can see it came out pretty good. And the green tape is a nice way if you really need to test something without damaging it. This is just a cup that you can see that I've tested many times to use before I do an actual engraving, just to make sure everything's the way I want it to be. And I found that throwing green painter's tape on there at a very low setting will give you the engraving. So this was 308 millimeters a second at a 9 power. Gave me that light white engraving on the green tape. You cannot use blue painter's tape. It will not. The blue laser and blue tape do not work well together on diode lasers. It just doesn't do anything. It doesn't mark it. So I always use the green.